Dr. Paul, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
We're talking about the importance of getting the arts into the community, and one of the ways that you're doing that is you have a new partnership with Youngstown City Schools.
We do.
Could you talk a little bit about that?
I can, thank you.
Okay.
So Dr. Wendy Case, who's the violin teacher at Dana, won a grant from the National String Project Consortium. And the grant is, she also applied for and was awarded another grant, a further grant from Youngstown Foundation. And then Joe and Pam Carolla also have given money to support this project. Joe, for people who don't know, is a YSU trustee.
Okay.
And so the idea is the funding, the grant is very selectively awarded, and it's money to, number one, train more string teachers. So it pairs with the music education program that we have already. And then those teachers and the faculty mentor go into schools and then either continue or support or start string programs in the schools. So this is the inaugural year for Wendy and our students to invest in that. And it's sort of, a trying out basis now, where eventually the students are required by the national grant to come to our college, which is great because that's another part that we're bringing students and families to campus, to Cliff. But it's to further enhance the learning that they get from the students, and then there'll be more faculty involved in that process. And so it's important in all the ways of training more teachers, training more orchestral students, and she's only in one school this fall. We will expand to more schools in the Youngstown City School District as she works out what her template is, as we get more funding. It was tremendously important, and they were wonderful to work with in the Youngstown City Schools to help her get that set up. And so it's another one of those things that probably won't get much press per se when you compare it to our multiple performances. And so it's really important that people understand we're trying to be as many things as we can to as many people, and important to bring the arts to all the places that we can.
So I wanted to talk to you because it seems like a lot of things are ramping up, particularly at Cliff. It seems like some more performances are coming out. Some of that may be due to the spring approaching. That's kind of when the season is. But I think a lot of it is also perhaps that we're coming out of the pandemic a little bit. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit about some of the challenges you faced during the pandemic, particularly since what you're teaching students how to do requires them often to be with a lot of other students in close proximity, and then to also gather members of the community together with them to see what they're doing. So I wondered, what were some of the challenges that you faced during the pandemic at the teaching creative arts?
Well, you sort of summed them up.
Right.
It was a very succinct summation.
We're done.
So we're finished. Thank you very much. So if you go back to 2020, I'm not sure many of us can remember it.
I remember it.
You remember
it
a
happened.
time. We were on spring break, and this is not news to anybody. We were ordered by everybody in the state and the whatever to go home. So we extended spring break by a week, during which time our faculty across campus had to put all their classes online. It's how it was the rest of spring break. So you can have some understanding, as much as we can, of what faculty, let's say printmaking and painting. So if you think a minute for how those very interactive arts involve equipment in the classroom, that's how they're based. They're experiential by nature, like labs were in chemistry and STEM. So our faculty, very creatively, very quickly, and from all appearances, course evaluations, which are surely not the full measure of a faculty member's engagement with his or her classroom, were stunningly good. Our faculty rose to the challenge across the college to meet those very important goals of continuing teaching in a really unfamiliar at that time environment. We still continued to create art. That's when we came up with those C3 connections, those videos that we produced. Some of them were past performances and exhibitions. Some of them, our faculty, in the middle of putting all of those courses online, were willing to also do, for instance, the art faculty did gallery talks. And so they would highlight their own work as a way to keep the arts ever in motion and in people's minds, and as a way to, we're stuck at home and this is pretty scary actually, but they were willing, superbly so, to continue doing that. I'm going that much into detail to have people understand the great lengths our
Right.
faculty went to not only keep teaching our students in those professional degree programs, but also at that period of time we were the only people, because we could, it's not because anybody else didn't want to, but we could continue bringing the arts to the community.
Well, I guess that's kind of what I was getting at.
Yeah.
Was, it's almost like manufacturing or sports or something like that, where it's very experiential. So you can't just kind of tell these kids,
No.
you're going to have to put your careers on hold for a couple of years or whenever this thing gets settled down.
No.
And at the same time also, you have the community that would like
Right.
its art back.
Yep.
Like,
Well,
give me my art back.
We rehearsed, the music folks rehearsed under tents. The university cleared off a huge part of the WIC parking deck and just dedicated it to rehearsals. It was an entire campus effort.
Sure.
We found a way to keep bringing art to the community, and that was always what we wanted to do.
Well, I've missed the art. I used to come to, and I still do, a lot of your events. Like I always go to the arts show every year, the arts festival. I go to a lot of the performances. We love Carols and Coco. I took my daughter to see Pinocchio when you had the
yes.
marionette thing.
Yep.
She really got a kick out of that. So I guess, how important is it for the community to be getting that back?
Well, I think it's very important that I printed out some stuff I could share about how important the arts are, not only to us individually, but also to communities. This was pre-COVID, these numbers. They came from the Ohio Citizens for the Arts, and they partnered with a couple of entities that produced some pretty significant numbers of the impact, and they call this the creative industries. And so the creative industries that they recognized were just museums, performing arts, visual and photography, film, radio, television, design, publishing, and schools and services. Okay, so those were the metrics, or the categories for which the metrics came. So this report says, ready?
All right.
In Ohio, $41 billion in economic activity while supporting nearly 290,000 jobs annually and $4.5 billion in federal, state, and local tax revenues. The arts are important also to Youngstown State. It's woven into our strategic plan. The arts and culture are specifically mentioned as objectives and goals that we will increase and reach for in the collective impact on the community. And that's in addition to good place to live and work. It's in addition to health care. And so we lived that mission before, and I want to say we are actually living more of that mission now. And in some ways we've found a different kind of voice, or a different place for our voice during the pandemic. Doesn't mean we've abandoned the things that we were traditionally known for,
Right.
But we are increasing and especially working to elaborate on community collaborations.
Let's talk about the Pepino Performing Arts Series. So, do you want to talk a little bit about it? Tell somebody who may not be familiar with it what it is.
Sure, if you want me to.
I'm asking.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
So it's a series that was funded by Ed and Chris Moransky in
Right.
honor of Chris's father. And so, like I tell you repeatedly, everybody else too, everything we do is nested in academics.
Right.
So we bring in people and they sort of rotate around. The marionette performer is always just sort of there. It's really interesting. It's a way to outreach to children. We're trying to increase the outreach we have to families with smaller children. And so that's one of the ways that we think that we can do that. We need to do more, but that's a good way. And then
My kid loved it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so then we rotate around other areas in the school, in the college. And so Kareem Suleiman, who is one of the finest Calmer tenors in the world, who won a Grammy, who has sung at the Met. He's coming. We were going to have Phyllis Chen, who plays miniature pianos, but she had to cancel, So we try to get the exotic, but we also have string quartet. which is always sponsored by WYSU. It's one of Gary Sexton's desires in life, and so we partner with him to do that. And so it's just, it's a broad sampling of programs that we have in the college. You know how we talked about how we survived and evolved in
Yes.
the pandemic? Well, one of the things that grew out of that was the establishment of the Dana Ensemble. It's a professional ensemble made up of Dana faculty members and just a few key, depending on the literature they're performing, professional musicians in the region.
Sure.
It's a very unusual thing for music schools to have professional ensembles nested in them. But it was in a conversation that I was having with President Tressel, probably in the fall of 20, about what you had said. We continue to bring the arts to the community. People needed it in ways. I mean, you articulated that very well. And he mentioned to me how many people had said to him over that period of time how much it had meant that we had continued to be able to do that. And so I don't exactly remember how we got to, because we were still pretty much in the throes of it. We were back, like I said to you, half and sort of not in the parking lot and down, theater,
Right.
sort of how they were. So he said something about, would the faculty consider possibly, I think he's the one who said, do you think they would ever consider forming an ensemble and playing? And I said, I don't know, we can ask, and I never really thought of it. So I mentioned Kivy Con Littman earlier, so I called him and said, this is sort of a wild idea, but what do you think your colleagues might think? So he asked. Within less than a week, people had said yes, and we'd planned the first 2 concerts. And so it's evolving very, very steadily, and Dave Morgan, who I mentioned earlier, does arrangements. For one is sort of jazz and Great American Music Songbook focus, and the other one is purely classical. So the concert that we gave on February 8th had James Suggs, who's a terrific trumpet player, alum, Evelyn Wright, who's one of the premier jazz singers in the region, as guest artists with the group. And then the performance that's coming up on May 1st is a children's concert, which will play Carnival of the Animals and Peter and the Wolf. And the narrator will be none other than James Tressel.
Oh, okay. That'll be fun. That'll be cool.
So that'll be a really, that's another way of, we're trying to engage young families. We're trying to help with that notion that the arts are important across the board. They can be fun. We're bringing people to downtown Youngstown. That concert will be held at Stambaugh. We're bringing people, young people, to the community, to campus. We're trying to make those efforts more viable and more accessible, and add more of them. And that's another point that I was trying to make earlier, of offering activities that engage and entice a whole range of people. It's just another one of those efforts for young families with children, and it's fun and it'll be terrific.
And some future artists might be sitting in the audience.
Right. Oh, exactly.
Yeah.
And you notice how I just am giving plugs for all of our events as they go. But it's only as good as the people we can get in the seats to appreciate the great amount of artistry that comes out of the college in every area. The faculty truly are world class.
717 Credit Union. Business services designed to meet your daily needs. Commercial loans, business deposits, merchant and payroll services. 717 Credit Union. It's knowing you were treated right every time.